joined Intel Foundry, actually I joined Intel just not quite a year ago, so I'm relatively new to the Foundry business and to Intel. If you were able to attend yesterday, thank you, first of all, for your investment in time with us. I think at the highest level, I'd just say, just as a kickoff here, we're intending to convey, all of the keynote speakers are new to Intel. Our CEO, tenure measured in weeks, myself a little less than a year, and my colleague Naga, who runs all of our manufacturing and technology development teams, joined like 2 weeks after I did. So, one of our intended messages was for us as a foundry, yes, there's lots of cool technology, we're listening to our customers, but maybe just as importantly, we're bringing to Intel Foundry a perspective, a customer perspective, because we are fabless companies, we were part of companies that do business with foundries. So we've come into the foundry business trying to transform it to be more customer-centric. That's enough for me. Yes. Now you guys get all the rest of the time.
Well, this customer-centered thing is like a statement, but it's a difficult thing to achieve because the innovation, the designs of 30 parties could be totally different from each other, no? So how did you manage that?
That I would say the single biggest challenge for us as Intel Foundry is exactly that. And I think that is a learning journey for us as a foundry team. And I think if the reality of the semiconductor industry is actually extraordinarily complex, and we're counterintuitively, we're a multi-billion-dollar startup as Intel Foundry. What I mean by that is our whole life has been acting as a foundry for one customer with one target market, one set of designs and design styles. And when we realized that it was critical for us to take these technologies and make it available to other companies, I'll just politely say I think we underestimated the implications of our technology not automatically being a perfect fit for all this diversity of design styles and the different markets that companies serve. So what hopefully a big takeaway from yesterday is that we've developed some muscles and some business processes, and we invested in engaging with many more customers than we have before, and we've made a bunch of changes to both what we're doing and how we do it to accommodate that. But it's a lot. It's a lot. I was with previously, I worked for a company called Global Foundries. I spent a lot of time in Dresden, Germany, where they have a large facility, and they went through a very similar transformation. Global Foundries was spun out of AMD, which is another big chip company that their history was serving AMD, and it took them, frankly, a number of years to transform into making Global Foundries what it is described as, a global foundry, instead of just a company that was supplying to AMD.
So do you see any split in the horizon?
No comment. But I'll say this. The way we describe it is there's separation with a capital S, which is, I think, the core of your question. And to be very direct, I have no comment on separation with a capital S. But separation with a lowercase s, meaning that within Intel, we will act like Intel Foundry as a supplier, and my customer, Intel Products, will act like a fabless company, is very much a separation journey that we're on. And that means separation of people. Like, we need our employees to understand and identify, am I a foundry employee or am I a product employee? It's business processes, it's financial systems, it's IT systems. I need now, instead of just someone in product just typing a number into a spreadsheet and wafer starting in a fab, I want a purchase order, right? I'm going to negotiate pricing. I'm going to negotiate capacity. Heck, I'm going to even take them out to dinner, treat them like a customer. That's not something that a traditional integrated device manufacturer like Intel historically would do naturally. So separation with a lowercase s is absolutely something we're doing. And I think it's important for Intel Products to be an amazing fabless company and for Intel Foundry to be an amazing foundry. That separation is necessary.
Do you believe that have any kind of relationship already?
The way I would describe it is they are our number one customer by a long shot today. And I will treat them like any foundry would, their most important by revenue customer. But it's important that the whole industry not see them as somehow magically advantaged because we have the same parent company. I need to be credible that I will be an honest broker of our foundry technologies to any other fabless company, some that compete directly with Intel products. So yes and no is my long answer. But I would treat them just like my competitors would treat some of their most important customers, but not special with a capital S.
They're very important by virtue of the business.
That's exactly right, by virtue of the scale of the business that I'm doing with them. Absolutely true.
Are you worried about the Trump tariffs?
No.
Why not?
I don't have any specific comments on tariffs. I mean, I'll say this. Businesses in general, speaking generically, businesses in general don't like taxes, don't like obstacles to global trade. I think that's just a natural business reaction. Global, but that said, I think at the highest level, the U.S. government is trying to achieve certain ends, and like everybody, we're just sort of sitting back and trying to understand, what we need to do on a daily basis to manage and keep our business healthy.
Do you think whatever does happen tariff-wise, it will kind of bring the industry, like there will be conversations kind of in the industry about how to navigate them? Do you think it will bring the industry or companies closer together to try and navigate some of these wins? Could they be an unintentional benefit, I guess? From that
I think that's fair. I mean, I think like we're having a conversation here. I think everyone's sort of coming together and saying, okay, what are you hearing? How do we want to react to it? So I think there's just a natural reaction to just what are the regulatory dynamics on any given day, and I think coming together and talking about it is definitely something that we're doing. But I think we're all just sort of letting the administration manage a process and just trying to anticipate where it will take us.
Is it a case of having to, realistically as a business navigate both sides of this, in that Intel, because of the current administration in the States, is promoting the idea of manufacturing in America, but also it is to your advantage if tariffs come in that you have these manufacturing sites outside of America?
I don't have a comment. I'm not going to argue with your point, but I don't have a comment.
Great.
I would like to know what role is Latin America going to play in this new era?
Yeah, I mean, Latin America is an incredibly important part of Intel's strategy. We have a number of manufacturing facilities in Latin America. We have a growing customer base in Latin America. So I think globalization in general is driving us to think very, very carefully about our supplier footprint, where we manufacture products. And Latin America is core to us for at Intel. Latin America is a core part of our manufacturing strategy.
Sorry, Mexico has announced plans to build a semiconductor fab under the leadership of the President Claudia Sheinbaum, and I'm asking, how is Intel exploring a possible collaboration or investments for this project, or do you have any approachment about that?
I don't know, but I would love to. I would love some help facilitating a discussion there. We have a team in Intel Foundry that is doing exactly what you said, talking with governments and working with governments to understand if there's a partnership opportunity with us as an Intel Foundry team. So okay. The answer is I don't know, but I would love to be a part of that, at least to have discussion.
I'm talking about Latin America. What is the potential in which sector of the supply chain? Maybe we don't have fabs, but we can have this ATP process, or what is the potential in our region?
The answer is
Since the perspective of Intel, of course.
Yeah, I mean, Intel has facilities in Latin America now, and I have every expectation that if there are, I don't know, are you describing like government incentives, or I just want to make sure I understand the core of your question?
No, I mean, like, it's related what she's saying, but I'm thinking, what is the potential that you are seeing in Latin America? For which sector of the supply chain, maybe?
For us, again, I speak from the Intel, to your point, I speak from an Intel Foundry perspective. If there are manufacturing requirements for, for example, some of our advanced packaging capability, we're making decisions now on how to invest in growing capacity. There are a number of areas that we could talk with Latin American governments or other companies about where we should be investing in our expansions outside the U.S. I don't have any specific initiatives right now, though.
So I want to elaborate on Elaine's question. I mean, yesterday's presentation, you guys presented on the one side, Intel is an American producer who produces in America and will ramp on the production line in the US, including all the new chips. On the other side, you mentioned that your customers are expecting for a global supply chain. So how do you balance it? And the question is whether factories outside the US, like Ireland or Israel, should be worried.
Yeah, they're incredibly, but I'll be very direct. Intel in Ireland, in our 3 nanometer technology, is the company manufacturing by far the most advanced silicon in the EU today. In Europe, is coming from Intel's fabs in Ireland. Ireland's an incredibly important facility for us. At the highest level, I'm going to get gorpy. At the highest level, building a new fab is a $30+ billion investment. So it's a very carefully considered, intentionally done. You got to build a really strong business case to do that. That said, our Ireland facility is actually one of our most advanced facilities today. It's what we call an EUV facility. It has the latest generation of ASML's, extreme ultraviolet tools installed and qualified in production. So as customer demand drives us to expand, our capacity in nodes like 18A or further, places like Ireland could be ideal, lower investment required because of the existing facilities that are there, places to bring on new technology nodes.
This goes well to the Israel fab?
Say again?
This goes as well for
as well as for Israel. Israel today is running, just as a practical matter, Israel today is running what we call the 10 nanometer, 7 nanometer technologies, which have sort of the N-1 platform. So everything I said is identical. There would be incrementally more investment required in Israel just as a practical matter because of the equipment that's there today. But the exact same dynamics are there, absolutely, both Israel and Ireland.
And are you expecting decisions about German and Poland fabs to be made anytime soon?
I wouldn't say anytime soon. I mean, those are paused now, and as customer demand, it's actually the exact same conversation. As customer demand is realized, we'll make decisions on the timeline for Germany and Poland, as well as do we want to deploy capital to some of our existing facilities, including places like Israel and Ireland.
And kind of on that point, something you said yesterday in your keynote was that you or Intel was kind of working to a 2-year release cycle because that's something your customers liked. Obviously, other chip companies, NVIDIA, AMD, have announced last year that you're moving to a yearly release cycle. Is that intentional on your part? Like you say, has it come from conversations with customers? Do you think it will stay at the 2-year? Could it ramp up to yearly?
I do. That's a great question. The way we're thinking about it, and by the way, I think this is reasonably aligned with the way companies like NVIDIA and AMD are thinking, is we do, because we're dorks, we do these major nodes, and the major nodes are like 18A for us, 14A, and those, I think, preserving a 2-year cadence is aligned with their requirements. But what you also saw is we announced 18AP, where we're doing like a little bit of a performance kicker on one of those major nodes. So we're doing both. We're preserving a 2-year cadence for the major nodes, but providing feature enhancements that meet our customers' ability to do annual product refreshes while sort of stepping down the curve. So I think that they are reasonably well aligned. So we're supporting their annual product release cycles with 1-year kickers and 2-year big node jumps today.
Yeah. Going back to Latin America, do you see potential to expand its supply chain beyond the countries where Intel already has operations, like Mexico and Costa Rica?
Yeah, they all fit into the same dynamics. You know, I think we as Intel Foundry, because of the magnitude of the capital, I mean, you know, it's difficult to describe just how much capital goes into these facilities. It's like shocking for me. Like it's been an adjustment for me, honestly. So we have to be extremely intentional in how we make those decisions. When we saw that in Germany, Poland, we see that in a timeline, even in the United States in our Ohio facility. You know, we pushed the timeline out for that. So we're being extremely cautious and, you know, just rigorous in how we're managing our balance sheet to ensure that when we're making big decisions on where, and just as importantly, when do we build those next facilities. So, you know, we're making those decisions very, very regularly, but they're not quick. You know, there isn't, I don't expect that things could change, but there isn't like a near-term catalyst that would drive us to say, okay, we're pulling this one back in, or we want to go invest in a brand new country right now. Those are out in time.
And what about working with outside suppliers?
You know, I mean, feeding into our supply chain? Yeah, for sure. You know, everything from components to raw, I mean, our supply line has a massive dependency on you know, raw materials, you know, equipment, capacitors, and all those things that I know we're constantly looking at. I don't have any specific, you know, effective response to that, but the answer is definitely yes.
Maybe to drill down on it from another angle, from Intel Foundry standpoint, what would need to happen for you to need a new fab in Germany, for example? What would be a candidate?
It would be pure customer. For us, the decision is relatively straightforward to describe. For us, it would be new customer demand that exceeds the capacity that we have in place now. So the way we're thinking of our current node priorities is we're deploying, I think we described this, we're deploying first in a facility we have in Oregon, and then we're now ramping up a facility we have in Arizona in the Southwest. And then our next ramp will be in Ohio, in the eastern part of the US. And then as customer demand grows, we'll expand beyond that. Again, we've got investments that we'll move into in Germany and Poland, and then we've got capacity that we can leverage and make decisions on using other existing sites like Israel or Ireland. The dynamic that I would stress, though, is, and I think you heard this yesterday, this industry is really flipping growing. I mean, the macro dynamics, barring somebody doing a cannonball in the pool on us, the macro dynamics are, you know, double-digit CAGR growth for advanced node semiconductor industry demand year over year, like $1 trillion business by the end of the decade. So the macro actually supports that level of growth. It's on us, just to be direct for the Intel Foundry team, it's on us to hit the ball out of the park on the technical stuff we talked about. You know, we need to prove to our customers that we can get these milestones, you know, these development milestones met. And then we need to secure the trust of the customers to say, hey, I want you. You know, I want you to be the supplier of this new product line I'm doing. I'm not going to bring this business to one of your competitors. I'm going to bring this business to you. So building trust by talking with them, you know, being much more interactive with them, and then building trust by executing on our milestones is what we're going to do to secure that demand that says, my next big problem is how do I dig these holes fast enough? How do I get the tools to fill in them? But right now we're at that earlier step of securing the customer wins with confidence.
At this moment, the idea to set up a new factory in Italy is completely dropped.
In where? In Italy.
In Italy.
I don't No, I don't know if it's completely dropped. I wouldn't say it's not part of my daily discussions right now. I think that the sites that I talked about in the U.S., expansion in Arizona and Oregon, in Germany, in Magdeburg, and in Poland, and then obviously our existing facilities, I think are make sure those are full, utilized, and that we meet the plans we have to utilize the partnerships we have in those existing places before we go to other ones.
And I would like to ask, what is the Intel's Foundry strategy to compete or collaborate with TSMC? Because I read this report that says that Tan met with the company CEO, so I would like to know more about that.
Yeah, for us, TSMC is an important supplier to my customer, the Intel products team. So it's actually very, very healthy for those CEO relationships to exist, and it's incredibly important that Intel and TSMC partner in many ways. But from a pure foundry standpoint, my goal is to ensure that I have technologies that are competitive with companies like TSMC or Samsung who are in the foundry business. So a lot of the technical things are ensuring that our customers see us as credible alternatives, meaning that we can be power performance consistent with them or have an advantage to them. But just as importantly, I described our business as a startup business. For companies that are currently doing business with my competition, they've probably been doing business with them for years and over product cycles. So I have work to do to compete with TSMC. I have to show those customers that I can be a credible supplier. We use the word trust over and over and over again yesterday. We have to develop a trusting relationship with customers, and that just takes time.
And in the event the CHIPS Act is repealed by Trump administration or modified, how could that affect the Intel's foundry strategy and the relations with other countries, like such as an example, Mexico?
I guess the way I would answer that, the U.S. government has actually been an extraordinarily important partner for Intel Foundry. One of my messages yesterday was to talk about a series of investments that the CHIPS Act is one of them, but there have been others, programs called RAMP, programs called SHIP, a secure enclave investment, that were fundamentally about ensuring that the U.S. government and its customers has access to leading edge technology manufactured in the U.S. And that has allowed us to stand up the foundry business. Has been an important part of that, not just for government business, but for commercial business. Everything we're doing for the U.S. government has ties to commercial things. They're not asking us to do and make investments in ways that aren't consistent with serving the commercial market. So our partnership with the U.S. government is quite strong. The CHIPS Act is a part of that, but isn't just that. Now, the things that we're doing in partnership with the U.S. government, as I said, they're aligned with commercial needs. So companies in other geographies can take advantage of the results of those investments, like our technologies, like the IP. So my hope is that those investments are seen, while yes, they do enable our capacity and capability in the U.S., we're making that available globally to customers.
I was just going to say, if the CHIPS Act funding is repealed, will that dramatically impact on kind of the plans to expand in the US? Will the strategy need to change, or is that kind of uncertainty built into?
Yeah, I think we're working very closely with the U.S. government to make sure we meet our obligations under the CHIPS Act. And to be clear, this is not a U.S. government giveaway, right? The CHIPS is a partnership and a set of commitments that we've made to deploy capacity, to meet technology nodes. So I guess I would just say we're working really hard to ensure we meet our obligations to the government under the CHIPS Act.
What kind of process do you aim to do, mainly in the U.S.? Because as we saw yesterday, this industry is a global industry.
Yes.
With many aspects being done in different countries.
Yes.
How is it possible to bring all of this process to the U.S.?
How is it possible to?
Yeah. Or which kind of the process do you want to bring to us?
Our focus right now is on two fronts, ensuring that we are both driving research and development and are driving all of our initial capacity availability for the coming years will be in the U.S. That is our strategy today. But again, we can use that capacity to serve customers anywhere, just like our competitors do. They're able to ship their product, obviously subject to import-export restrictions, to ship their product globally. So our intention is to use the facilities that we're investing in here, right now, to serve everyone across the globe. And I think it's a reasonable strategy right now.
You mentioned the active engagement with the US government on the CHIPS Act, and then there's an EU CHIPS Act as well,
Yes.
which kind of feels like it's stalled in terms of the conversation. I know you're kind of new to Intel, and wondering is there any kind of like recent active engagement with the EU on that, because they do now have kind of a renewed strategy in terms of its competitiveness on tech, and it seems like they would be interested in reinvigorating
For
that.
sure. I would say I'm just coming up, just to be open, I'm just
Yeah.
coming up to speed on that, and I've actually just learned some of the subtleties of the source of monies in the EU chips, whether it comes from the countries themselves or whether it's coming from like a central EU allocation. So I'll directly say it's something I'm paying very close attention to, and I'll definitely spending some serious time talking with the EU and their governments to understand if there's sustained partnership opportunities for there. There's already been a great relationship. We're incredibly proud of what we have in Ireland today, and if we can build off that, I think that would be fantastic. Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
The new customers of IA, are demanding a lot of energy, power. Are you
Yes.
seeing a risk to attend these new necessities of the customers if the power doesn't be enough?
Yeah, so for the big data center, the power data center availability, power for data center availability specifically, yeah, I think we are going into a world where the assumption of growth in the semiconductor in many ways is tied to, can we generate enough power to actually fully utilize these chips? I think you're absolutely right. So I don't think it's a risk with a capital R, as I would describe it. I think it's something where there's been a pretty substantial shift in investment away from just buying chips and assuming the power will come. So you're seeing, and we're seeing together, a lot of companies that are building these data centers also now investing in ensuring they can generate power. Some of them even locally at the site. I'm seeing some extraordinary innovation to bring natural gas directly to data centers to actually power the sites locally. There's nuclear investments happening. Again, we can all have fun debating the timeline that those will actually be implemented globally. But there's a shocking, from my perspective, if you'd asked me 5 years ago what was going to be gating the growth of our industry, I would not have said electricity. But that's a huge focus right now, for sure.
Do you have a plant?
You mean specifically
a plan to make to take in your hands a possible risk?
You mean to manage the?
To manage a possible risk if the power.
If it's not available. You mean if power is not available, or I think there are site-based risk mitigation plans. So if I think of it from purely my manufacturing perspective, we have very rigorous local power management processes in place. So if there was ever a grid problem, our manufacturing facilities can go. But with respect to ensuring power is available for my customers to build the data centers that will drive the demand for the silicon, I wouldn't say we're making direct investments to support that, but from a market standpoint, I'm paying very close attention to making sure my perspective on how much they're going to buy is backed up with power generation capability that's coming online to ensure that these guys aren't going to buy chips and then put them in a warehouse that's in a data center that's not powered. So I'm watching very closely, but it's mostly like market intelligence rather than specific plans I'm making to invest to support that capability.
I have two questions regarding customers. So a year ago, you guys announced that Microsoft is a key customer in the same event last year. This event, you didn't announce any new customer, any new clients. How far are you from reaching the point in which you're getting a new key customer, like a large chip design company? So this is the first question. The second question is that you reported a week ago an increase in revenue for the Intel Foundry. What's behind that, and anyway, what kind of customers do you have right now?
Yeah, so one of the joys and challenges of being in a services business like Foundry is I'm not able to be the voice of my customer. I have to let my customer be the voice. I was privileged to have some of my customers like MediaTek join us yesterday, but ultimately I'm not able to make announcements about projects I'm doing with customers. My customer has to lead that process. So my weaselly answer to your very real question is I don't have anything to announce there about customers, but that is literally my job and it's what I get out of bed every day to do. So we're very focused there. Your second, can you ask it again?
It was about the earnings quote a week ago that the Foundry actually generated $4.7 billion in increased revenue. So what's behind that, and what kind of customers do you have over there?
Yeah, right. Great question. Right now, the way I would answer that right now for Intel Foundry, a radically massive portion of my revenue is tied to my top customer today, which is Intel Products. We are generating revenue from external customers, to be very clear, but as you see like an externally reported Foundry business, for the near term, you should fundamentally assume that revenue change is tied to my customer dynamics today with my number one customer. That's the biggest driver by far. So as their demand dynamics change, my revenue dynamics will change. They should track together today.
So are the,
Alright, our time is almost up. If you have a quick one, we can ask one more.
Just it's
Go
actually
for
just a
it.
follow on.
Go for
That's
it.
like,
Sure.
are the key opportunities for growth for Foundry outside of Intel then essentially?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, in the long term, it will be, by the way, my Intel product colleagues' perspective and my perspective is the healthy state for Intel Foundry will be serving a much broader set of customers. It will insulate us from the dynamics of one market driving our revenue profile. It will give us more diversity as customers, ebb and share in market shares. So I would say growing our revenue externally in the long term is absolutely critical for Intel Foundry.
All right.
Thanks for your time today, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
I appreciate it.